Mani Padme Om Mani Padme Om. Oh, my goodness. Om Mani Padme Om. Well, the fancy app didn't work for me, but I somehow got on via YouTube. Hey, let's see who's here today. We got one person so far. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Happy Monday. I'm get my light turned on so I can see my notes and everything. Who's on today? Want to say hi? Today's topic is going to be dancing in the viral storm, which I realized after the fact kind of sounds like, we're, oh, hey, heart. It kind of sounds like we're celebrating this horrible disaster, and that's not the case. But what it makes reference to is, the dance. Buddhism, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. Hey, Rob, let me show you your cup. Here it is, very special cup. I don't even use it. I don't dare drink out of it. Rob left this at my country place, my little piece of land. So Buddhism, it really, I was reading this whole section about, which is famous in Pato Rinpoche's book, The Words of My Perfect Teacher. And we're following the outline. At the same time, it's harmonizing amazingly with what's going on in the world, and suffering in samsara, or cyclic existence, is the topic we're kind of on for these weeks. And the section on this is famous for being difficult to relate to as modern Western people, because it presumes rebirth, and it has sometimes it goes into a little bit of literalness about karma that's a little bit too much for people. But when I go back and look at it now, I don't think about it that way. I think it's like he wants us, and his predecessors for 1,000 years before that, 2,000 years before that, want us to zoom our camera out on the story of ourselves and the world, instead of being caught up in what we're doing, all of our thoughts and worries in our little tiny life. He wants us to kind of zoom out and look at, well, what's life like for living beings, And they had an array of life forms that they regarded as real, that extended beyond animals and humans as the only, for materialists like we are, and scientifically minded people, animals and humans, animals speaking broadly, and humans speaking broadly. That's it, for life on Earth. But in the traditional societies of India and Tibet, as you guys know, they definitely believed in ghosts, and they had a whole, vast way of describing different kinds of ghosts and different kinds of troubled spirits. And then they had, sort of local deities, and then they had really big famous deities. And then they had kind of competitive, invisible, godlike forms that were trying to get to the top and become full-on gods. So it was alive. Everything was alive with the awareness of, the belief in, there's more than what we can see. But even if we look back and zoom out to life on Earth, he 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 and Buddhism goes through us. There's at every level of Buddhism, there's trying to walk in their shoes feeling. Like, what if you were a snail? What would your life be like? And how long would your life be? How would you die? You know, would you be happy? Would you suffer? You know, so it's actually a series of exercises on each of these realms, so-called rough divisions into 6 of all conceivable, unenlightened life forms. I guess you could say that. Um, well, what does that do? To spend like a week thinking I'm a aardvark, you know, and relating to that pain and so forth. I think a lot of sensitive people do this naturally, thinking of, for example, all the vegans and their concern about farm animals, and then people who are very concerned and they can really feel for the animals that are being hunted. And for those people, I don't know if it's helpful or not. It'd be interesting, after to talk to people after they've done these kind of practices. I was just talking with Lori, who's off and on here. She's a kind person, and feels like all of you on here feel the suffering of others, right? And there's supposed to, in Buddhism, there's a balance between it's not exactly balance, but there's compassion side, and then there's the wisdom side. And the wisdom side is like non-conceptuality, not making processing and making your direct experience into a whole construct of I like this, don't like that, this has this name, this has that name, dropping that and being beyond, outside of your little personal framework, and yet finding that inside there's another way of being that's after you drop all that story you have. And then there's the other side, which is raising compassion, obviously Buddhism famous for that, right? Raising compassion and concern for others, and then a sort of generalized compassion. And I don't know whether Lama Tarchin's explanation, my dear Lama, first Lama, was that you can attain great awakening just on the raising up compassion. And then naturally the the empty nature of things will dawn for you. And then the other way around, you've heard me say this before, you can, but it was my first one-on-one teaching with Rinpoche, and it really stuck with me. Then raising compassion, raising emptiness side. So like you think about, I don't want to say Zen, I'm going to say Zen. There's some Zen schools are really about sitting in emptiness. And the thing about Vajrayana Buddhism is it melds the two. And so they're practiced simultaneously instead of parsing them out. But there's value in, if my question was to myself that I was bringing up is, do you need somebody who's already super sensitive to really go deeper and deeper into the suffering of others, Or is it really time to, get beyond the other self, the feeling between the two, to equalize everything? And focus more on like meditation, that kind of thing. But it doesn't really mean that if you're a Vajrayana practitioner, it doesn't matter so much because you're practicing Dendro or deity. It all comes together. doesn't it? So anyway, so much of our Buddhism is about having this getting out of your head and getting the eagle view of your reality. And from the eagle view of reality of life forms on Earth, not getting attached to them personally, that, or having a feeling like, gosh, porcupines are cute, snakes are bad. Not engaging in that way. If you just look at, what's 4 billion years so far, and another 1.5 billion, we're going to be swallowed up by the sun. And in the meantime, each individual entity here is very, very serious about their own reality. He thinks it's really serious and true. And meanwhile, in the big picture, they're just they're suffering, actually. By the very nature of being all so wrapped up in their own perspective and their own thoughts and their feelings, they're suffering pointlessly. And so if you look at this big blue marble, or perhaps other blue marbles or magenta marbles that may be in this universe with life forms on it, with a big picture, there's a outpouring of love and compassion naturally, they're suffering and they don't even know there's any other possibility. I hope I'm being clear. This is just what I've been thinking about lately as I read this classic text on all the different kinds of ghosts and demons and hell. They were very into hell, with a lot of levels of hell. The most horrible suffering you can imagine, and that they could imagine, is probably similar to what we could imagine. The worst freezing, the worst burning, and enemies everywhere, paranoia and anger. So, sort of within that framework, that's the general topic right now. Here we are as humans with our own human kind of suffering. So, sickness. Maybe you have it yet. I hope not. I'm fine so far. But, in my state, the governor said most of us are going to get coronavirus in the next few months. And, most of them will barely feel it. And others will be struck hard. And it's mostly people like me with white hair who will be struck hard. And even people with more wrinkles, they'll get struck harder. But it's not always true. It's sort of random, And this is the nature of being a human being. Epidemics have always existed and will always exist. So, however, I want today to focus on this time that we have off. Even if you're working, Rob, I assume you're still working, right? And online. And then Heart Sutra, do you work during this time? I'd love to know. So I've been kind of thinking about retired people and people who've been, laid off for the period of time. It's a big opportunity to practice. Yeah, you're working, Rob. That's great. And people, but still, people who used to commute, unlike you, Rob, really have more time. So I've been thinking about how to structure things, how can I help people. Oh, public school teacher. So that's interesting. So, Hart, you are you're laid off right now, or are you still doing work virtually? Working from home as best you can, yeah. God, it must be distracting, and trying to work. I've been thinking about trying to meditate, and of course, trying to meditate while this is going on, but it must be so hard not to keep your mind on your work, and everything must be so chaotic in the workplaces. So, I don't know. I think for the sake of posterity, you guys are having not having long stretches of time to practice, but for your eventual interest and for the people who watch this in the future, I want to talk about um, using this time as a time to do a little bit more intensive practice. I did a little bit last time. Hi, Lori. Welcome. And this I'm coming to for there's two little secrets you may not know about me. One is that I have attention deficit disorder. I discovered this because I'm also a nurse practitioner by training, and I was working in a psychiatric research facility, and I took the same test I was administering to others, and found out that you could put me in that box. And so um, I'm not someone who's shamatha. And you're my seichik. Seichik means like one peak, like one place you're putting your attention, never wavers. I am not that person. Actually, Tibetan Buddhism with spacious attitude, that works better for me. Whenever I try to rein my attention into a little box, with in general, that's true for most people, but some people not. It just makes everything worse. The more you try, when you have ADD, the more you try to focus on something, the more your thoughts, the wrong areas in your brain light up when they do MRIs on people. At least that's what they thought a few years ago. And so your attention, the areas that are supposed to become really active diffuse instead. So this is what used to happen with me with learning math things. The harder I'd try, the worse it would get. And it was just very upsetting. So I gave up trying. And so somehow, though, I managed to get a master's degree in nursing. So I want to merge a little bit of health and also the Tibetan approaches to our body and how to keep our focus on meditation better. Some of these might work for your online work that you guys are doing now too. What I found and what the Tibetan system says and what we've learned with a few things from science. First of all, I think here of Adzan Pela Rinpoche, one of my lamas, he used to really promote joy, and actually Lama Tarchin used to too. Lama Tarchin would, if you were upset about something in relation to the Dharma community you're in, for example, he would say, he would go through all the things that I would have to be grateful for, and said, talk to yourself and remind yourself, here you are having this incredible opportunity to practice. How many people in this whole world have had this opportunity to practice before? How many people have met with the kind of incredible Tibetan teachers that I've met? So a little bit of guilt tripping. But also, and Adzan Rinpoche would just say, be joyful, think when you sit down for your session, wow, I get to do this. I've been emphasizing the impermanence in these sessions with you. And actually, thinking I'm going to die at the end of this session, or I might, it makes you joyful that you have one last session to do, if you look at it that way. One last meditation, one last opportunity to merge your mind with wisdom, and, do something completely different than most of the people in this whole world get it, and even conceive of doing, much less actually do, and creates unchangeable state. I'm not awakened, I'm not enlightened. The word we could use for enlightened in Tibetan is actually more like waking up. I haven't woken up yet, but I notice that I'm not as stressed out about potentially dying in this epidemic as most people are. I'm irritated. There's things I want to do and all that. But if I think about what my teachers used to say, I heard Lama Tarchin Rinpoche, and it turned out he knew he was going to die during the year that he died. And he got some kind of insight into that ahead of time. And he started saying, I'm completely satisfied with everything I've accomplished in this life. Everything is just great. And if I died today, I'd be totally fine, totally happy. And so I try to say that to myself, right? And I think, because death is the bottom line, right? The suffering, it sounds really hard too, but physical suffering. But if we say, I encourage you to plan what your strategy is for dying if you suddenly become ill and pass away. And it looks like it's going that way. Make a firm decision now about how you're going to approach it. Maybe you've taken a transference of consciousness retreat, learned how to do that. Maybe you haven't had a chance to do that. Maybe you have attracted to Amitabha. That's, when you think sort of literally mindedly, there's a pure land in the western direction with a big red Buddha in it, and it's very alluring and magnetizing. It's the easiest pure land to get in when you die. And when you drop all the, like deification of Amitabha as a thing somewhere, a guy in space, and you just think, may I, when I pass, go to the blissful, his pure land is called Dewa Chen, great bliss. Candy! Oh, gosh. Great bliss, pure land, right, Candy? Dewa Chen. And so I'm going to go to Dewa Chen. I'm going to go to the great pure space of bliss, and there I'm going to perfect my practice. And so a typical thing would be you visualize Amitabha up here, and then you imagine when at the moment of death that you're flying up and merging with Amitabha, who symbolizes your inner wisdom. Oh, I got a rainbow over there. Yay. I'm looking at the chat box. So, friends, let's do a little meditation, and then I'm going to come back and talk about real remedies for difficult meditation. And you guys are welcome to put things in the chat box here about problems. I realize this is like the opposite of a private space, so be circumspect. But you can just talk about if your agitation more is a problem, not being able to sit down in the first place to practice, physical pain, going to sleep. We can talk about all these things because I hope you're practicing a little. You must practice during this time in order to, be okay, even basically okay, right? Hey, oh man, I wish that app didn't work out that I was trying out today. It had a little chime that I could ring to begin this session in my tingshar in the other room because I was doing sword practice. So, okay, we won't have a chime. Let's meditate. Just you can use we're all grown ups here. We can use our breath, or we can just rest in our pristine mind, as Organ Choang Rinpoche puts it. In the non meditation, without an object. Either one. It's okay. Let's do that. Okay. So the topic is now remedies for meditation problems. And then at the end, I think since I see you all are probably wondering what to do with various practices that are all Vajrayana practitioners to some degree. Heart, I don't know. Many practices are being recommended, how you could integrate those, or which ones are most important, that kind of thing. Sound good? So just going to start in with, we've talked before about, when you're, but just to reiterate, when you're agitated, these are all like common sense things, but we forget them when we're actually doing them because they just relate to our human body, right? When you're feeling agitated, you lower your gaze, you sit in a lower place, you eat heavier food. Sometimes, man, it's seriously agitated, but you all the way down the floor, darken, close the curtains, and that's really good. And then gotta cut that caffeine down. Really, when I was young, people didn't drink a whole cup of coffee out of a mug, like 8 ounces of coffee or more. It was like 4 ounces maybe. We're drinking. You don't have to eliminate it, but if you're trying to, for example, visualize something and everything's flying everywhere, and you're never able to form that, for example, the little letters we visualize, or I'm not saying I'm great at this, but all the ornaments on the deity, then think coffee right away. Yeah, 100 milligrams in an 8-ounce cup. And theanine is in mostly in green teas. It's in some black teas, but not all. L-theanine. So what they do is put what I do is put some theanine into my coffee because I like people in their 60s. Oddly, I I can't. I have a hard time thinking in the morning, so the wake up of the caffeine is much appreciated. But if you balance it by putting some theanine, which causes alert, relaxed state, it really unweaves a lot of anxiety. And it's well established. There aren't any bad brands. I mean, there's probably somewhere, but they're all this, so it's cheap. And so let me give you the dose here. Not that any of you ever had anxiety. Okay. 200 milligrams L-theanine. So I use a squirty bottle. And that, because if I meditate some before I have coffee, but then if I really need to focus, or coffee doesn't make you focus, but be more alert, I do that every morning. 1 cup of coffee. I probably don't get a full 100 milligrams because that's 8 ounces. But it really depends on, how you make it and the particular kind of coffee it is. So worth a try. Some people are naturally resistant to taking the L-theanine as one ingredient, many in green tea or matcha or whatever, out and isolating it and using it. And that's fine. Just drink green tea. Mix some green tea with your coffee. Doesn't that sound good? No, it doesn't. And then, ashwagandha is an old Ayurvedic anxiety remedy. It does have it's an herb. It does have a libido increasing. It has a testosterone-like effect in it. Not so much so you're going to get, grow facial hair or something if you're a woman, but if you don't, just be aware. If you like it, maybe you like it, maybe you don't like it. And for some people, it works for sleep taken at the hour of sleep. They used to have formulas for this. They do have formulas for this in Ayurveda if you want to get more into it and learn about the traditional ways of using the medicine. And then, so that's kind of for agitation. And don't press too hard. If you press too hard, there's a condition known as lung. Lung is the name of your side of circulating energy in the Tibetan system, but there's this kind of state you can get into, especially if you're in a high, airy place. It can happen a lot, or pressing to say a lot of mantras, more than feels comfortable. You're trying, you can get a kind of swirly feeling in your head, like the energy is going up. It's not grounding you. And the traditional remedies for that were chang, beer. Chang is not exactly beer, but sake is close too. But again, the Ayurvedic or Tibetan medicine people can tell you there's certain kinds of alcohol. They have it all refined. But the Lama Rinpoche's advice was, have a beer or half a beer and chill out, pull back on the pressure you're placing on yourself to do whatever meditative practice, like do mantras or so forth. My discovery personally was soaking my feet in hot water, like not hot, but bath water was helpful, like magnesium, the Epsom salts, grounds, going out and working in the dirt, that's helpful. Don't forget exercise is necessary if you're doing intensive meditation practice or you're working at a computer screen all day and then it's going to sit. This is what's happening to me is I have a book I'm working on and I have all that, still the PR machine for my little or nonprofit goes on and on. And then, meditation sitting also, right? So you really have to put it on your schedule for the day to exercise unless you're an exercise natural. Don't forget, I'm fortunate enough to have a treadmill in the basement. And so we talked about agitation. Let's go to the other side. You're falling asleep in your session. There's mental dullness. That happens to all this happens to me. That happens to me too. I start getting partial dreams or waking dreams that are, kind of fun, but pointless. And well, what do? Naturally, you raise your gaze. You sit on a higher, like open place. You eat lighter foods, staying away from the heavy dairy products, for example. Less meat, more salads, and so that it's very easy to fall asleep in meditating if you eat too much and too heavy. And in our society, too many carbs make you fall asleep, of course. And fat people like me never put those two and two together, until you stop eating them. Oh, that's why I was falling asleep all the time. My body was focused on digestion, right? And one time I had, when I was meditating a lot in retreat, this is just like a seed I'm planting in case, in case I die after this presentation and you do a meditation retreat. Everything was rocking. Like I had stepped off a boat and it wasn't a hallucination. It was like a physical malady. Everything was just like, I looked at the water bowls on the shrine, the water isn't moving, but inside it definitely felt like I was rocking. And Anam Thupten Rinpoche helped me with that. He was my meditation master. When you do a longer term retreat, you have to have a real master to guide you. So it's difficult to find. He was very kind because I was one of his close students. And he said I needed to do prostrations. So I did just a few prostrations. It was 100% gone. But once again, a lot of things are corrected by introducing exercise. In 3-year retreat, friends, they used Lama Rinpoche when people were young. In the first retreat, he had people go on doing 100 prostrations a day after they were done with their nundra. They finished their nundra in the first 3 months or 6 months of the retreat or whatever. And then, because he did allow people in at that point without nundra completed yet. And then he had them going on doing 100 prostrations a day for the rest of their retreat. There's other bigger exercises for yogis, but that's the simplest one. All right, so now let's talk about let's practice, and then we'll finish up by talking about, I think some of you guys were online with various lamas this weekend. Tukujime Wandok Rinpoche and Oregon Choang Rinpoche both taught on different forms of the Dorje Gotrap, the Vajra armor mantra and practice, and other lamas are online giving all kinds of practices we should do, taras and so forth, and it's all good. So let's talk about the practicalities of that. And you can, and again, ask me questions if you have anything, like say I only have 15 minutes to practice each day. What should I prioritize? Or I'm going to be laid off and I can have all day long to practice. How would you structure that? I'm happy to answer any of that kind of question. But first, let's practice. I think we don't need Tonglen this weekend. Life is Tonglen, right? Sending and taking. We're all nice people. We know, we can see that suffering that's going on. And this week is going to be really bad, unfortunately. I'm not saying that from psychic insight, but from science. Yeah, I think you probably follow the charts too, right? And just so you know, I'm going to start doing Sur and Amitabha practice once a week online here, because why not? I'm doing it anyway, pretty much every night. And for the dead, because the great Rinpoches and Lamas are focused right now on, understandably, on prevention and giving people practices to do if they become sick. And the deaths haven't really are just really, really ramping up right now. And so far, our sanghas here in the West Coast Nyingma world, I haven't heard anybody who's been directly ill and died yet. But we should learn how. Daniel, my roommate, is in the other room right now editing a workshop I did on Sur, short version, how to. And then Sur is this nurturing with food the dead and then feeding them odor food. And then Amitabha, we just talked about. So we could do that for like half hour once a week at dinner time around then. Okay, so let's practice. Since the people I see are all Vajrayana practitioners, I'm going to do this one. This is a practice that works with the lung, or the energy in your body. And you start by, do you know the syllables Om, Ah, Hum, Buddha, body, speech, and mind? Right? Om, Ah, Hum, Hum or Hum. Imagine this is a Shine practice, but using the breath, basically. On the out in breath, an Om is flying from far away and coming in to you. Then you briefly hold your breath, not really long at all, and then your ah at your throat is you visualize a red ah at your throat. That's a white Om coming in. Maybe it goes to here. Then a red Om, an ah at your heart, and you can use Western letters if you want. And then down here, that's a throat, not a heart. You know what I mean? Ah here, throat. Here, heart. Hum. And hum. We'll go back out again into space in front where the Om came from. And then so we're just going to slow down our breath, try to sit up straight, if you know how to, if you're one of those people who does the 9 breaths with your nundra, This is like that. It's actually in the Longchen Nyingtig Nundro precedes. It goes right after the 9 breaths in the Longchen Nyingtig Nundro. But anybody, for today, everybody can do this. You can actually try to say it, but it's hard. Is that good? So if you're operating under a wisdom lama, doing your ndro or so forth, or whatever practice he or she has given you, you can ask someone about, if you have time, you can ask them about incorporating that. I do that 21 times in my, right now I'm working with a Launching Tignundro again. I'm reconnecting with Adzam Pelo Rinpoche's energy. He's not here, he's in Tibet, but I accomplished that Nundro a long time ago, so I'm kind of going back and revisiting, and there's several things that are just so beautiful, and that's one of them. It's like from my ADD brain, it's very calming, it allows you to, in a not tense way, try to focus, which makes everything go out for me, but in a relaxed way, using, a lot of physiologic. There's a lot of physiology in there with the way you're working with your breath, but also working with the technique of colors, movement, and it's easy to get absorbed into it if you may not experience that on the first try, but subsequently it's very very good thing to do. Of course, in the last few days you've been introduced to many things that are very good things to do right now. The Dorje Gotrop, the Vajra armor. Candy, did you receive the Vajra armor online this weekend? I think I saw Rob on there. I saw Lori on there. But there were two different back-to-back live streams for different lamas. It was very cool. From this classic, but I'd received this before from Lama Tarchin Rinpoche in the Wayback Machine. And this is the go-to, the Om Pema Shawari one is the it's a form of Guru Rinpoche, typically, when it's pictured as, the visualization that Rogen Chong Rinpoche described. And then it's, but the Dujam Lingpa, was it Dujam Lingpa's practice? They were both, the Dujam Lingpa practice that Tulku Jimmy Wand represented and Lama Sonam is apparently teaching is Vajrapani. Vajra in hand, the blue Buddha like this. I think a wrathful form of him. So they're both blue because it's a blue Guru Rinpoche in the other practice. So anyway, both Lama Tarchin Rinpoche and a Tibetan medicine practitioner recommended reciting that mantra for your health. When you wake up in the morning before you do any ordinary speech, just keep saying it all the time. So you have to memorize it first. So fortunately, I memorized it when I was in my 40s or 30s. So now it's there in the bank. And I recommend memorizing that. It can be your Hail Mary, so to speak, when you get a serious illness and of any kind. It's always good to do. Okay? And so you can do it like that if you're working. That's a way you can do it. If you have a partner, you don't want to wake them up, you can do it silently, but it's a little better to do it out loud. And so saith Organ Choang Rinpoche. I think for both of those mantras that he presented another Vajra armor mantra too, and a sadhana short. I love the way he presented that. Both lamas were fantastic. So it's easy. So you do it. That doesn't take up any extra of your time, before your coffee and before you start, if you're doing a morning practice, before that, just wake up and think, oh, yeah, Om Pema Shawari, And then if you're able to sit down with and do the formal practice of summoning up the visualization, sitting still. I'm having a delay. Gosh, I'm going straight to YouTube. It's interesting. I have fiber network. It's directly wired into the fiber network. Done everything to try to get it aligned. Don't know what to say, friends, but it's good to know. Thank you, Lori. So Some people recommend putting Dorje Gotrab when you're practicing it as a manifestation of Guru Rinpoche, specifically, right after your Guru Rinpoche mantra in your nundro. If you have a nundro that's centered on Guru Rinpoche, slide it right to your own home Benza Guru Pema City Home or whatever, and then slide in the Pema Shawari in there. Generally, my lamas put the wrathful practices, and it's very wrathful, in the evenings or later in the day. So I'm sticking it before I do Vajrakalaya and protectors. I apologize to the Mahayana people here, new meditators, because I see my friends online. I'm kind of saying I did post on my Mountain Facebook page a kind of schedule for people who are really unemployed. But I kind of doing it in the evening, and it could be as simple as, if you're a working person, saying as many as you have time for, and then, there's a 4-line Vajrakalaya practice that I can get to you if you don't have. We find to get a text for that, and then there's 4-line protectors that can be inserted into that. So Vajra Armor, as much time as you have, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Vajrakalaya, 5 minutes, 10 minutes with protectors. It's all included. And you've got a 10 to 20 minute evening practice. Evening practices are harder to integrate, aren't they? So, but all the masters I've kind of resigned myself to the fact that all the great masters want us to do this mantra and protect all sentient beings. But think about, you're not just protecting yourself. This is you're connecting with Guru Rinpoche as a wisdom deity, and this will have a protective effect. And even if you do get sick, it'll help make it less severe. So the Jim Rinpoche, everybody saying that. So they want us to practice it, so we should practice it, right? And then the practices like Song, Sur, Chit, and Tutor, which you guys are familiar with, they're very important if you have time, so like on a weekend or something. If there's not too much crisis mode, if you could pick one of those, real Songshid is the most common. And think about, while you're doing it, think with kind, offer to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and protectors, but also think with kindness to all sentient beings equally, and then particularly the most troubled. The most troubled, difficult ones are called Lenshak, or the karmic creditors. Like, you have, the idea is that you have done them wrong in a past life or in this life. And now harm is coming. Like, if a being is turned really, really negative, there's like negative energies are coming around you and the world. And so instead of trying to kill them, although if they're recalcitrant, it may be necessary, liberate. But we're probably not that oriented that way. Instead, you're feeding them, asking what they need. And of course, Samasultram is famous for this, feeding your demons work. And it's in all those practices, not just in the Chit. So right now, the traditional beliefs about this epidemic are definitely based on disturbing and killing endangered species, destroying habitat, and forests in particular, and so forth. And on the medical level, pangolins, the long story, the poor pangolin. Pangolin scales were used in, probably still are in the black market, used for Tibetan and Bhutanese incense. Just like 10 years ago, they were still being used. Totally endangered species of the Himalayas and China. And now the pangolin disease is one of the vectors, pangolin, bat to pangolin to human, is being speculated upon. Isn't that incredible? So that's, that's totally in harmony with the traditional belief, that negativity is coming from the abuse of the environment. Okay, Laura, you're gonna watch it later, and that's fine. I think it's on your end because Heart is seeing it fine. If anybody else can give me feedback, if you feel like it, would be great because I'm trying to make this thing work. So, most important practices, if you do Nundro, do your Nundro. If you're mainly a meditation practitioner, do your meditation. If you're not being able to settle down, along with all those things I mentioned, this breathing, this Om Hum practice, mantra yoga, I'm giving it to you. Okay. And you can talk about it with your lama if you have questions, whether it's appropriate for you. And then Tara, if you love Tara, who doesn't love Tara? Pick your favorite one. White and green are particularly being mentioned, and then they're inserting the specialty practice in the 20th or the 21st Tara. You can, from the both Sangye Khandro and Lama Sotram, and others are focusing on that mantra for the 20th and 21st. But honestly, my opinion is all 21. These are all emanations of Tara energy, right? Of the Savioress who's gonna, brave heroine who's going to rescue us. And she's in here. She's going to rescue us. Come out. She's going to manifest in us. And every single activity is going to be needed in order to cope with and bounce back from this crisis. Not just epidemics of doing, right? We've got other problems, economy being, poverty and yeah. And when one bad thing starts, they all start, right? Well, on that happy note, do you have any practice questions or that you feel comfortable asking on YouTube? You've integrated the advice. So, yeah, what I said, some kind of Vajrakalaya or Hayagriva or Dorje Drolo wrathful tough deity in the evening as your last practice, usually with protectors, is good, whatever length. And there's fat, and so meditation. If you have time, keep going with your Nundro, song, sur, Vajra armor practice, Vajrakalaya. And if you could only do one, I think what comes to mind for me is meditation, whatever level you can do it, and Vajra armor practice. Okay, so I'm gonna now. We're gonna come out with. We got the text ready for Sur. A lot of you guys already have it. Maybe all of you do. But I've made a standalone for Sur practice, and Daniel's making the video, and then I'm going to do live. I'm going to make those available to people if you get time on the weekends or whatever. Offer this, help out the people the animals who have died. That's it. Oh, Candy, thanks for the feedback. Because I discontinued my last app because there was no alignment between my mouth talking, the visual image, and the words. It was getting farther and farther apart, and they couldn't solve it. And this new app I tried couldn't get me online today, so we'll work with that. Hey, it's nice to see you guys. At least your name's on the screen. Thanks for the feedback, and I'll see you next week because it's 7:05. Bye now.